the integrity of the votes that are actually cast, so that they are all counted accurately, and that none of them are interfered with, changed.
Who's the one that said this was going to be like the easiest questions in the world? I think I'm coming here today. Thank you. It's a good question. The question is, how do you protect voter integrity and voting integrity and make sure? So the first thing is building confidence in the public. We already know about the hacking. It did occur. Even the man in the White House has now admitted to that something happened there. It did occur, and it occurred in Arizona. 2 of our counties we know were hacked. It's a question of how deep they went into it, but we know it was hacked. I don't want to give my job as a federal law attorney is to, allay concerns and not create such a distrust of the system that people back away from participating in the system. So my first job is making sure that people have confidence that you have a professional in here that's dealt with voting rights and voter integrity for years. And that should get people the confidence to participate. The second thing, you need transparency here. I mean, even if there's nothing that's happened, even if there's no monkey business, even if there's nothing to show in terms of evidence that anything went wrong anywhere or that anything could go wrong, why not make it as transparent as possible to the public? We should have, the counties are run by the elections are run by the counties, and the counties have their own systems. The Secretary of State is the one that puts out the rule book, but they all have their own systems to run it. But rather than going to war with each of the 15 county recorders, as this Republican and Democrat, as this Secretary of State has done, you need to work with them to develop plans to both build public confidence and trust in the system, but to make sure that there is an auditable system so the public can feel it and see it tangibly. We have the ability to purchase equipment that prints paper receipts for who you voted for if you're on some type of computerized system. Why shouldn't the public have that? Why shouldn't the public be able to match before it gets counted to make sure that, yes, this was who I voted for, to double check it? If somebody, I gotta make this comment, if somebody has a disability, a physical disability, needs help, we need ability to have it in Braille for people that are sight impaired so that it can be then transformed so that nobody else, and it remains a secret ballot so that nobody else can see how that person is voting. But we need to take steps so that people have a recordable system. There is a suit in Pima County, as many of you may be aware of, regarding ballot imagery. A lot of the new machinery comes with a preset setting that when the ballots are counted through a machine, that it takes an image of it. And the setting was turned off. And it was Pima County where it started. It was actually Pima County group that did the first lawsuit on this in Arizona. Now it's happened elsewhere in the country, and most recently this last week, that the images are now considered part of the evidence of what happened in an election and needs to be preserved. You need to keep that on. It helps build public confidence about the system. And that way it's auditable in some fashion. If there's a mistake, you can look into it. Every step that could be taken. One more thing on this. Department of Homeland Security has offered funds to the states to make sure that we can, and has offered programs and assistance. We need to participate in that. We shouldn't be fighting against help that's given to make sure that the system is not penetrated by the forces that are hostile to our government, to our politics, to our elections. We also just need, if there's money on the table, we need to be taking it. So, yes. And I'd be happy to further answer your questions. I believe you may have some. I'll be happy to stay afterwards to further answer.
A
Yes.
national problem at this point.
What is?
The refusal of some states to participate in the help to have a backup for the elections.
There are some states I spoke with many secretaries of state. I've been dealing with secretaries of state and county recorders and election officials around the country for years. Secretary of State in Minnesota, he'll tell you his state is participating. His state is getting the help it needs.
Is Ohio? Is Pennsylvania?
3 states, but you left out Wisconsin. I wonder why you focus on those 3. I cannot answer that. I cannot answer. It is a national problem. Look, Russia clearly did something. They're not our friends. At least this government. The Russian people, fine. This government is not. And they're going to do it again. And again. And again. As is North Korea. As is every force that is hostile to us, whether a nation state or not. We can't dismiss this, as our Secretary of State did, and say, as she did, that concerns over Russian hacking are overblown. That's not vigilance. That's not building public confidence. We need to be vigilant. The Secretary of State's office is an office of protection. Next question. Yes?
Will you be receiving funds from a state Democratic committee or party?
Well, there's a contested primary. And during the contested primary, first off, under the law, the parties can't help prior to the primary if it's contested under the new law.
If you were to win, though, you would receive support, financial support?
From the Democrat, well, if there's anything left, they got a lot of primaries to get through this time, my God. But yes, would I take support from the Democratic Party? I'm a Democrat.
No, because you're talking a 7-figure cost of the election.
Well, let me tell you where we will not take funds from. Yes, we will take funds from people that are interested in what we want to do with this office. We have to raise a lot of money. We will not take funds from Pinnacle West, which is the political company for APS, which is the public service in much of the state, north of here. We're the only major candidate for Secretary of State in either party who is accepting donations and raising funds. The only candidate in either party who is accepting those major candidate who is not taking funds, who has not already taken Pinnacle West money. We won't do that. We would talk to you about it. We will not do that. And for those of you who are not aware, it's because of their influence on the Corporation Commission.
Yes, yes.
And the corruption that's happened in the Corporation Commission. I believe, organizations have the capacity to change just like people. But I haven't seen that yet from Pinnacle West and APS. They've done it so many cycles in a row, and no, not right now. Democratic Party, if they give us money, yes. But right now we have a contested primary, so they're not going to. And if they are, then they're doing something improper because it's not in accordance with the law. There was another question right over here that I saw. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering about the Pebbles. A lot of people vote with Pebbles here.
Yes.
I've never waited in line. What's the story up in Maricopa County? Don't they have access to Pebbles, and don't they know about it, or aren't they pushing it, or?
They are. We are a heavy vote by mail state.
Okay.
It's gotten more and more so since the days of I was describing my dad's experience in the 80s. Absentee voting became much more common in the 90s, and eventually the Pebble came along where you can permanently sign up so you get the ballot mailed to you. A lot of people vote by mail, but that doesn't mean that if you want to go vote in person that you shouldn't have the opportunity and have it made as easy as possible for you to vote if you're a legitimate voter. And that's the problem, is that people didn't. The Pebble drops a month out from an election. Things change. Things change. We actually, I think, lost the presidential election last time because of the Comey letter, and in large part at least, made enough of a difference. That came out, 10 days before the election. So people are waiting longer and longer, and if you wait too long, it's too late to send in your ballot. I want people to vote today for me, but it's just not the way it worked. Here, let me tell you about some things that I would do in terms of reforms. And this is stuff that has to come from the legislature, but I'm going to be the biggest mouthpiece for all these things. Again, any election official anywhere should be doing everything possible to making it easier for people to vote and participate in the system. That's their prime directive. That's their prime directive. So automatic voter registration, automatically. The government knows where to find you to pay your taxes, where to go to register your kids for school, where to register you for selective service. They're registering 17-and-a-half-year-olds and 18-year-olds for selective service. Why aren't they registering them to vote automatically? I don't understand that, and why should you have to go through that process? So a hostile crowd here. You know, as I said, you know, you shouldn't have to do that, but you do. So you need programs in place, and it's the Secretary of State that should be leading the charge on this. Should be working with the public schools and those that are in other school systems and education systems to make sure that these kids are informed about their civics and their civic duties and are given the opportunity to register, because they do have to affirmatively register. So I believe in that. I believe in universally mailing to every registered citizen the ballot. Everyone. You shouldn't have to sign up for the ballot. It should be everyone sent to you. Now, if you want to send it back by mail, great. There are rural and tribal lands, however, that, you know, it's up to 100 miles to your mail drop site, and up to, you know, multiple families can share a mail drop. So that's not the best system for them. You need to do other things in those areas, rural and tribal lands, to reach out to them. The Secretary of State's office should be leading the charge for this. The Secretary of State's office should be investing resources, should be investing vocal sources to be able to speak for making sure that there are roving vans, if need be, that provide access to everybody that needs access to it, to the polls. That's what the responsibility is. Make it as easy as possible for people to vote. I believe in ending precinct-based polling, where you have to go to an assigned precinct to vote. You should be able to go to anyone. These voting center ideas are great, so long as they're convenient. If you put one in areas, as they did in my county, as I described in Maricopa County, if they put fewer and further apart polling centers in areas where there's people earning less than $30,000 a year than you do in places that earn more than that, that's not equitable treatment under the law. And that's going to be fought against by me as Secretary of State. That's the type of access that I believe in. Yes?
How do you feel about restoring voting rights to ex-convicts?
So, you know, Florida is going through this right now. You may be hearing about this in the news. Look, they've done their time. They've done their time. You know, and unfortunately, we do know that we need criminal justice reform. A lot of them done time inappropriately. My mom, the public school teacher, grammarian, is killing me right now. I hear her in my head yelling about the phrases and the way I'm putting sentences and words together. It's amazing. Look, you know, there are countries, industrialized countries, where people in prison vote. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Camera. But if people have done their time, they've gone through the parole, they're restored citizens. So, yes?
Actually, two questions. What is the status in the state right now of any polling place asking for an ID besides your name is on their list? And the other question is, what is the status of what the legislature is trying to do? I think they're trying to put forward a citizens initiative to get rid of the independent redistricting commission.
Well, all right. Well, Ducey would like to, Governor Ducey, respecting him, Governor Ducey would like to pack the Independent Redistricting Commission, expand it. I'm using the word pack because I'm very suspicious because of what happened with the state Supreme Court. You know, FDR didn't get away with it when he was president. That's where stitching time saves 9 justices is where that was supposed to mean, because he wanted to expand the court and appoint more Democrats. Well, here we got more Republicans, and that justice, just like voting, shouldn't be about party. So that's wrong, and now here we go with the Independent Redistricting Commission. So, you know, right now it comes down to one independent, and there are 2 Democrats, 2 Republican appointed, 1 independent, so it's really one person that's swaying. I can kind of see where the argument against that is coming from, but then you have, it's coming down to 3, and it's still coming down to the 3. I don't know how you get away from that. The process is supposed to be fair. What's going to be interesting with the Independent Redistricting Commission is that because of Shelby County v. Holder, the case I was talking about before, we're no longer under federal pre-clearance. So those maps don't necessarily, it's still not clear, have to be pre-cleared to make sure that there is at least equal opportunity. It wasn't guaranteeing a representative in certain districts, but it was at least guaranteeing equal opportunity for primarily Spanish-speaking people to have representation. So there's that. ID laws, this is one of those creative ways where it's being politicized. And there's been national commissions to deal with this. The Carter-Baker Commission. It's Jimmy Carter and James Baker. Jimmy Carter's a Democrat, James Baker's a Republican. Right? They got together. They kind of admitted that there was no voter fraud in the country. This was a while ago, after the 2000 election. It wasn't real voter fraud, but okay, we'll check people's IDs if we have to. Here's my problem with it. If you're going to have a voter ID law, if you're going to have it, make sure everybody has equal access to the voter ID. State of Alabama did something really cute. They required, because they were under the federal Alabama, right? Deep South. They were under federal pre-clearance, just like Arizona. We're in the same company. Which means that we can also change who we elect to U.S. Senate, by the way, because they did that in Alabama. But in Alabama, they got cute. They said you need your voter ID that we were requiring has to be issued by the DMV, which we call the MVD here, a specific office. But what the state of Alabama did is because of budget reasons, they closed the motor vehicle issuing ID, the ID issuing offices of the DMV in predominantly African American counties throughout the state for 2 cycles. Ladies and gentlemen, the question on the floor is why? It seems like we keep finding.
What
Yes.
excuse do they use?
Budget. It's funny how the same state budget applies differently to African American counties versus suburban Caucasian counties. Curious that way. So these voter ID laws are tricky. It seems to be where it's moving towards, just historically as a pattern. I'm not talking as a candidate now. I'm just talking as someone who's worked in the field. This is what people are what governments are doing. If you're going to have it, make it fair. I mean, Arizona played a game with the registration, having a separate state registration form versus the federal form. And we ended up with a whole bunch of provisional ballots, and people that when they went to renew their driver's license, and they didn't sign up to register to vote for a specific party, again, they figured they were already registered. Yes, I'm already registered. They check that off, but they don't declare a party. Well, then all of a sudden they're no longer a Democrat. That's wrong. Just even having the separate forms, and trying to keep college kids from voting. I mean, come on. Make it more difficult for Native Americans. Yeah. Wait, you had your turn. I know you.
You mentioned college kids, and I think that's our best homecoming. And they have done many things about all of the things you've mentioned, aside from the fact that they make it very confusing for them. They live in one city and they came from another. Should you register here or register there? They need advice on that. We need to be thinking about helping them have it.
Wouldn't it be nice for election offices to actually do outreach to the college campuses?
Oh,
Wouldn't it be nice for the
absolutely.
chief elections office to be doing outreach to millennials and college students and trying to get them to vote?
And
Wouldn't it be nice to have candidates who've actually gone out to college campuses and educated, not just recruiting for a campaign, but educated college students? I'm just saying.
The League of Women Voters has tried.
What?
League of Women Voters.
League of Women Voters, that's why, are you a League of Women voter? Where did I say I got my start? Where
50 years.
did I say I got my start? Well, you beat me, all right. That's where I got my start, New York, working for
I picked
volunteer.
that
You picked that up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yes and yes.
Is the president's federal voter commission dead, truly dead and buried? can it raise its ugly head again?
Yeah, he's president. He can make another commission.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, is the Presidential Election Commission to figure out whether President Trump received 3,000,001 votes more than Hillary Clinton or not? Is that a dead commission or not? Right now it is dead, but it could be revived. He's president. He has the right to start a commission again. I think, I think the emperor wears no clothes. And in this issue and everything else.
He can change his mind.
What? He could change his mind about them? Why should this issue be different than any other issue? I'm sorry, I didn't say that on camera. Wait, now,
No, Chris Kobach was put in charge of that.
Chris Kobach, Michelle Reagan's best friend you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, Chris Kobach is the Secretary of State of Kansas. Chris Kobach was put in charge of the Presidential Election Commission. Chris Kobach has authored a lot of the bills for which Arizona is the petri dish. It needs to stop. We need to have people that know what they're doing, particularly when it comes down to elections, that have experience in elections here in this state running the elections offices. I have a question here and 2 questions back there, and then I'll swing back this way. Yes?
These reforms that you're talking about, how can you be sure that you'll get the money to be able to carry them out?
All right, we got a critic here. Look, first I gotta get into office. Then I gotta deal with the legislature, which hopefully we're changing. And, talking as a partisan, I hope we're changing for us. Talking as an elections and a person, or as a potential Secretary of State, or I expect to be your Secretary of State, it's not a matter of party. We need balance. People need to start talking to one another again. Talking to one another again. There's enough people on the other side of the aisle that have had enough with this nonsense too. And it's hurting our economy with all these bad bills that affect voting and everything else here, and our education system and everything else. They've had it. People need to start talking. Those of you who've been in Arizona for a long time, just so you know, a little bit more of my background. I started in 1984, was my first campaign I worked on for Gary Hart for president. I volunteered. I volunteered for a number of other campaigns. Carolyn Warner in 1986, our at that point, our state superintendent of public instruction, brought me aboard as one of her most junior staff members when I was in high school. I go back a long way. I worked for Mo Udall on Capitol Hill. I helped Al Gore. I helped a whole bunch of candidates along the way for 33 years. But Carolyn Warner, who was the Democratic nominee in Arizona in '86, expected to face Burton Barr, the House Majority Leader. He was the kingmaker there. She was expecting to face him in the general election, and instead, he was surprisingly beaten by Ev Meekum, who was later impeached and convicted and removed from office. So, the reason I'm bringing that up, and it's a subject of talking, is because Carolyn will tell you today that Burton Barr, the Republican she expected to face, her words and her expression, would have made a wonderful governor. Isn't that refreshing to have people respect one another and both parties start talking to one another again? There are enough people on the other side of the aisle. I made a promise to agree.
Okay.
Final
Manning
one.
Green's the last one.
Final one. To have enough people on the other side. I will stay after to answer some questions. Yes. What?
I've had my hand up.
I know that you're the man in green. You're the man in green. You're the man in green.
Okay, I've been around as long as you, because on my first, this was 12 years old, my first campaign was for a guy named Harry Truman. So, but I'll say this. The one thing I got recently on a telephone pole about this proposal to change the election commission here in the state. And they wanted to know that, because my understanding is you're gonna have politicians picking, some politicians, there'll be one independent, and it's gonna be a large commission.
You're talking the redistricting commission or the presidential election commission? The redistricting commission? You got a poll on the redistricting
One here in
commission?
Arizona.
Yeah, okay. I'll take the redistricting.
I told them, I said, we're about 1/3 Democrats, about 1/3 Republican, about 1/3 independents. I said, I will oppose anything unless we expand it that there's at least 1, 3, 3, and 3, or something like that, so you have the independents have a voice as much as anybody else. But the way they've got it rigged is you're gonna have the politicians, and it's gonna be taken away from the judges having involvement, which they currently do in the state.
So I appreciate the opinion. What question can I try to
No,
answer?
I was just.
I'm not gonna compete with Harry
Hold on.
Truman, I can't do that one, so.
People don't understand how bad this commission is gonna be if they get it through, if they redo the commission. It's not gonna work.
You know, if we think we've had lawsuits already with the Independent Redistricting Commission since it was first founded, and Arizona was thought of as a groundbreaker on that. We were ahead of the curve on that one. You know, but we're gonna have a ton of lawsuits if it gets to this. I will stay,
We're gonna have wine
Yeah.
and treats, so you can talk to people one-on-one?
I'm being pointed to by two people.
Okay.
Final one, and I will stay to answer a few questions. We have 2 more stops to make in the next few hours, so, been all over the state, yes.
In recent weeks, about 7 weeks ago, there were 4 lawsuits filed in federal court. One in California, one in Texas, one in South Carolina, and one in Massachusetts, challenging the winner-take-all provisions of the state laws.
For the delegates to the Electoral College?
Electoral college, yeah.
It's too early to know where that's going to go. But 2 blue states, 2 red states, 4 federal circuits. If any case was ever headed for the Supreme Court on the express route, that.
It sounds like it, yeah. What's the question I can answer? Just.
The question is, Arizona is one of those states that has winner-take-all provision. It's in state law. It can be changed.
Mhm.
Would you support that? Number one. Or, number 2, would you rather support elimination of the Electoral College and direct
This is a
election
great
of
question.
the president?
This is a great question. I will give a succinct answer. Only in the interest of time. Yes.
Number 3 is something else, or number 4, status quo.
Status quo has caused problems. I was involved in the 2000 election. Raul Gore had 500,000 more votes. It came down to the way you wanted to count votes and how long people were given to get to recount votes in Florida. It shouldn't come down to that for this important an office. The Electoral College, the only way you can get rid of the Electoral College is by constitutional amendment. However, some states have divided their votes by congressional district. 2 states, yes, you know your stuff here. 2 states, that's Nebraska and Maine. Other states have been talking about doing it. This past election, 2016, might advance it. Look, the 1968 election was close to being a minority president as well. So we've had this issue before. But it's very serious stakes, and people are starting to understand the problems with the Electoral College. I don't know that a constitutional amendment can be passed. But what states could do, states such as Arizona, if its legislature believed it, the state could decide, we want to apportion by congressional district. This is the same legislature that they've held up the Equal Rights Amendment vote now, 2 years in a row. You know, and that held it up in the 70s, were one of the states that didn't pass it. So, you know, it's gonna be difficult in a state like Arizona to get it by. Would I like to see a more popularly elected president? Yes, I think personally, I think the Electoral College system is something from the Pony Express days. And pre-Pony Express days, the country has changed, technology has changed. I think it goes back to the question, the first question I took. It goes back to building confidence in the system. Right now, there are people that are just saying, like, why does my vote matter in Arizona as a Democrat? Because we're not gonna elect a Democratic president. Now we're getting towards a point that maybe, but there's other states that, on the other hand, Californians may feel the same thing. Massachusettsans, or what, I'm sorry, I've lived there for a year and I don't even know. What to call people from Massachusetts may feel, you know, it may be the other party. You know, this is a philosophical question. Practically, do I support the state legislature and the governor signing into law that it can go by congressional district? Yes. It's not gonna happen, unfortunately, but yes, I do. I'll speak about it. Be happy to. I'll stay around. Thank you again for having me here.